A property manager could be a deal flow source. Or like they have other clients who have rentals. They have some older clients who might be getting out of the game. And the insight they have and the lead potential they have there on units is huge. And so you get one good buy through your property manager every 2 years, and that more than pays for them.
100%. If you add up all the hours that they're going to save, and you went on Property Online and listed out all the properties and the phone numbers, made all the phone calls and started banging on doors during those hours, do you not think you could find one deal per year that would outweigh the value of what a property manager would cost?
Totally. Yeah, I don't doubt that for sure.
So it's a mindset. It's like, what do you want to be doing?
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.
All right. Another exciting episode of the Master Keys podcast. We're actually going to pick up where we ended. We teased at the end of last week
property management.
Yeah,
Part 2.
We didn't get fully into it. Do we want to just hit a couple high level news items to get us started? We won't digress too much, I promise.
Speak for yourself. Yeah, sure. Let's do one really quick.
Well, let's hit the big ones. Inflation in Canada down to 2.1%. Thoughts? I mean, that's low. That's low inflation.
That's low. Like I said, I've been screaming that the number's been manipulated anyways. Like, I think we're well below that. And I think our economy's very slow. But no one's actually refuted that or messaged me and been like, you're wrong. Usually they do. So I feel confident about my...
Do you feel that inflation is because of the housing number or just in general? Like they're just greasing it? I think finger on the scale.
I think the inflation number is a big part of it's because of the housing number and the cost of interest. And like, yeah, they've made some cuts, but it's been 25 bips. Like, it's not like they've made like a major change in the cost. So if you strip out the housing interest costs, then that inflation goes to like nil.
Speaking of 25 bips, the Fed did 50. Thoughts on that?
That was more interesting. The US Fed did 50. I was watching a bunch of stuff on it last night. Like, I think it's not going to be great for Canada.
Why do you say that?
It puts more, well, it starts to bring currency, like money back to the States, right? More investment back in the States, turns them back on. The only good news is that, I guess it's not that it won't be good for Canada. It could be. I saw our rates blipped a little bit up in response to that. But yeah, I guess if the U.S. economy does well, it could be good for Canada, I guess, in the sense that they're a big trading partner for us.
But we have to move our rates together, right? Which is part of it. And to some degree, I felt that put more pressure on Canada because we started our rate cutting before them. And now they have quickly been like, yeah, we see your rate cuts, we'll double you.
Yeah.
So now there's been a lot of expectation. Like CIBC is convinced that they're going to do a 50-point cut, and then next announcement October 23rd, maybe. Don't hold me to that. I don't know what date it is.
It could strengthen our currency a lot, which would be nice. Give us some value back on our dollar. Might in the short term might force some people to be like, you know what, now I'm going to move some money into Canada before the value of their stuff continues to rise. So yeah, actually, I take back what I said. It actually could be good, but I haven't done enough research yet to feel comfortable in like how it's going to boil out.
Yeah.
I had some people saying it's similar to what happened in the 80s. But again, I haven't read through it all yet to understand what that's going to look like. I
was kind of confused too, because like there have been some decent numbers coming out of the States. Like their retail stuff was surprisingly strong. Their employment is holding out much better than Canada's is. So I was a little bit surprised that they did a bigger rate cut. Now their rate was higher to begin with and all these things, and they've got a rate ban. So it's a bit of a different process. But yeah, I was surprised to see that because their economy is actually doing better than ours.
Yeah. I think it's also like what people are feeling they might be taking into account what people are feeling on the ground. Because like when I talk to people that are living there, they feel like it's been turning and it's slowing down and they have concern. And so maybe they're trying to do that in response. So before the data shows that it's turned, because again, the data tends to lag, they're making the cuts in advance.
If you're a Democrat, it's not bad timing, right?
That's the other thing.
It's going down before an election. Other big announcement yesterday, the Canadian government said that they are going to contract the number of temporary...
I saw that. Again?
Yeah.
Foreign students
here. I think the total before was...
480,000.
Yeah, 2.8, and they want it down to 2.1. Was that?
They're taking it down 10%.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, to me, the whole thing is tough in the sense that we've built up like 35% of our economy and our GDP on housing. And now we're like, all right, we're going to punch it to make a recovery out of COVID. and now they're cutting it back. I guess it's just concerning to what it's going to do to the market. I think I've been saying this. I'm like, I think they've achieved what they're looking to do, which is ultimately I think rents are going to balance and decrease. Like I've been saying this to everyone, like I think rents are going to go down. Do I think they're going to like go to zero? No, I think they're going to balance out to where they need to be. Like, again, I was saying the other day, like there's units that were $1,000 or less that went to probably $2,000 right now. And I think they'll balance out probably more like $1,700. So for those people who have been like running a business on like real normal rents and like expecting that, that's fine. And a lot of these big developers will continue to operate. But there are a lot of new entrants to the marketplace that have been banking on these massive $2,000 rents that don't really make sense, that I think will get beat up if they're not prepared to take that 20%, 30% hit on the rental market. But I think what they've done is successful. They've successfully, I believe, at least locally, overbuilt the units. I don't know that Ontario is the same situation because where the numbers make it more skewed. Where we have purpose-built rental housing here, there's a ton of people throwing them up. Over there, it's a different game because they have people having to build condos to sell to investors, which the numbers don't really make sense. And that market's a much more difficult to suffice than on the demand. Yeah. But I think here locally, I think Atlantic Canada, especially Halifax, will have sufficed the demand. And now you can see they're switching gears. So like, all right, now we've got enough people. And now what's going to happen is we're going to be short on physical homes, not apartments, homes. And so now they're putting in all these incentives to buy homes, like 30-year AMs. That's a big one. The 30-year AM is going to make the difference. This is the
next thing I was going to ask you about.
Yeah. So it makes it maybe, let's say, 5 or 10% cheaper to buy the equivalent brand new home versus a resale home at that price. So people are going to shift towards new construction homes now, and it gives a bit of an incentive to do it. So, and originally it was just, and they upped the insured limit from $1 million to $1.5 million, which locally doesn't feel that relevant, but in a lot of other parts of the country, that is very relevant. And I'm sure I'm sure a lot of people, like brand new homes in Ontario, are probably on average $1.2 million. So it was a tipping point. So those couple things that they're adding in are allowing people to be like, okay, now I can get into a new home. And then I've been saying this is a lot of these newcomers, they like new homes more than they like
absolutely
resale product for a bunch of different reasons. And so these people came here culturally, they want to own. North American cultures want to own. They've now been working here for a few years. They're saving money. They're not living in apartments with a bunch of people because they like to do it. It's because they need to do it to get established. And now they're getting ready to move into a house. And now with rates where they're at, with a 30-year AM, like I was looking at a new house here, already it's like $4,000 a month for a brand new $785,000 house, beautiful brand new place, 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms. They'll do the same thing. They'll buy that and then they'll rent out 2 or 3 of the rooms. And now they're in the same position they were, but instead of renting a shitty 2-bedroom apartment that they don't own, they're in a brand new full-size house.
Yeah. Well, the one space where this, because the change of the uninsured cap from 1 million to 1.5, again, at first glance, like, well, that doesn't have a huge bearing on our market here because there's not that many homes that trade above $1 million. However, and this is where the devil's in the details because we don't know all the details of this plan. You could, in theory, buy a 4-unit, own or occupy it, and a 4-unit that trades under 1.5 million, you could get into with 10% down.
So
that's kind of interesting to some of our listeners, I imagine.
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I was looking through some stuff yesterday and I'm like, this could benefit where someone could get like a side-by-side brand new set of townhouses. Exactly. And because own or occupy half and then get the other half as a rental.
Yeah, because those were always coming in over $1 million. So you'd have to hit 20% down on the amount over $1 million, but now you're good up to, so that basically would save you $50,000, right? In terms of your down payment. Right, because you don't have to pay 20% on the $50,000 or on the $500,000. Oh, so it'd save you more than that.
No, it'd save you 10% on the $1.5 million you purchased. It'd be the $150,000 at the top end.
Yeah. So I mean that could matter significantly to someone who would be open to, say, owner occupying a 3-unit or 4-unit. I think they're going to allow that, but again, they might say this only applies to single family home and blah blah blah. But the issue with the 30-year AM, and we kind of talked about this, and I know people have probably heard about this. Right away, that'll save you. Like, say you stick to your budget. Say you were a smart person. You say, listen, I'm buying a $400,000 home. And I don't care if I have a 25-year AM or a 30-year, I'm buying a $400,000 home because that's what I'm comfortable with. Or maybe you're limited, with your down payment. You will save around 8 to 10% on the purchase on your monthly payment.
Yeah.
Right. So if your payment was going to be, just for easy numbers, $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're going to be around like 1,800.
Mm-hmm.
That you could take that little extra cash flow. That's option number one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the idea that you save money month to month.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can use this amortization and this reduced payment to stretch, because you'd be like, well, I'm approved for $2,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than save to 1,800, I still want to spend my 2,000. What does that get me? And that's actually going to get you 10 to 15% more on your budget.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, you've raised your budget from 400 to 450, right? Which you're thinking, this is great. Now I'm going to get, more home. I'm still going to spend what I was going to spend anyway, because I was planning to spend $2,000 a month. Now I'm going to spend $2,000 a month, but I'm going to be able to get a slightly bigger, better home. But okay, you haven't actually saved anything month to month. That's option two. The problem is right there within that is you're not saving any money. And if everyone makes the second decision, which is everyone makes the decision to just raise their budget, then all of a sudden that home you were going to buy for 400 has enough demand for it that it could just be 450 anyway. So the seller wins, the bank wins, but you still get the same house. This is what happens when rates go down, right? Which is the same effect to some degree as increasing amortization.
To an extent. I think the idea though is I think the couple ideas is, first of all, the cost of new construction, like the homes are so much higher. So ultimately they weren't going to sell at this price range. And it's at a point where our marketplace is owned by such large equity firms that they don't need to drop the prices. If there was a time in place when you had so many home builders that were
There's
smaller.
a lot of still smaller home builders.
But they're not doing the volume. They're just plain and simple. We look at our city. Look at all the neighborhoods that are up for sale right now. It's not small home builders.
I'm going to say you've got some recency bias here, because I've lived through markets where new home construction houses went down in price and started throwing in things like extra commission, TVs, D-transfer tax, all your appliances.
I agree. They're not making major reductions. It's the smaller guys that are going to do them, and they're not making major reductions. And there's only so much that they can go down by. Then what's going to happen is no one's going to build them again. And so what's going to happen? Prices are going to go back up.
Yeah.
So they will do the price reductions, but it's not going to be we're just going to keep building them and just reducing the price. It's okay, we'll do the 10 that we have, and then we're not going to build anymore. So ultimately, they need to get a way to get people to spend the amount of money that keeps that marketplace moving. So there's that aspect. And then the other idea with you're not paying them the debt for a longer period of time. There's no one, I'd say 98% of people will never actually see a full mortgage length through. The idea isn't that you're going to go see your whole 30 years through. The idea is that you're going to get into a brand new house. Eventually, it's going to be worth more money. You're going to sell it. You're going to pay off your mortgage. You're going to move on and buy something else with a bigger down payment. And maybe at that time, you take a shorter AM. But it's to get people in to start and keep the market moving. These are temporary mortgages. So it's how can we temporarily get you into this thing and then you sell out with equity, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And that is
cars, when they extend the amortization, that to me is dangerous. So it's okay, now you have an 8-year car loan. That thing's never worth any more than you're paying. So it's you have no choice but to be stuck in that long ass payment or roll forward debt and stack it up.
I think I understand your point. I think you're right. And anyone who's looking at taking this, and I talked to a client about this as well, they said, well, why don't I just take the longer amortization and then occasionally make installment payments, which isn't a bad approach, right? Yeah. But the idea is it's two schools of thoughts. One, how many people out there take a 25-year mortgage? There's two types of people in the world. Those that take a 25-year mortgage and after 5 years take a new 25-year mortgage, and after another 5 years take a new 25-year mortgage. So they end up with a 35-year mortgage. Yeah. That's person number one.
Yeah.
Right. So whether it starts as 25 or starts as 30, it doesn't matter. They're going to stretch that sucker out.
Yeah.
Then there's other people who, to your point, are going to find ways to pay their mortgage down or leverage one sale to have a cheaper mortgage on it. And they're going to take their mortgage, whether it starts at 25 or 30 years, and pay it off in 20. Those are the two type of people. So part of your argument is people are going to do what they're going to do regardless of their first term.
Totally.
Okay. On the flip side, Freeland did openly acknowledge that this was a supply approach to the housing problem, meaning they could see that all the developers were not going to build anymore. And that is a problem. So this measure, which the headline focuses on the consumer. Oh, we're going to make it easier for buyers. Blah, blah. This is we need to increase supply. We need to get new construction moving measure. 100%.
Is that not for the consumers?
What
happens when there's more supply of anything? Like we're seeing with the apartment world.
Well, in theory, the prices go down, but have they gone down that much? You just said the new construction, they're not going to lower the price.
No, but ultimately it'll get to a point where there will be enough supply and people won't be buying anymore, and then eventually the prices will have to come down. Yeah. Right. And because again, I think even if the builders have to start reducing their prices, then the guys sit on the land. There's the game of the money's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the quickness of those things having to move is less and less and less.
Yeah.
Right. That's how we've gotten to these exorbitant prices.
Yeah.
On a side note too, I want to address this because that just reminded me. Dan Foch's repost of a guy who said rent inflation's at its highest. It's like 8.8% year over year, like going crazy. And I meant to post it and I forgot. I sent you the story that I had typed up, but I felt that the headline was misleading, and maybe they were posting it for a different reason. But for me, they were like, look, the economy is not moving anywhere. All these other things are doing poorly, but then rent inflation's still blowing out of proportion. This is insanity. And I'm like, I might be wrong, and maybe this is different in other cities, but I would say locally in Halifax, that's not the case. I think the reason that they're saying that the rent inflation that you're seeing, the 8.8% or whatever it was, is because the rental listings are either units that are more expensive that can't be rented, or a lot of this new inventory that's coming on that's more expensive that's also not being...
Empty condos, for example.
Exactly. Empty condos that are not being filled, which reflects that the rent's gone up. But in practicality, being on the ground and seeing the units, rents aren't going up like that. Like, you're just not getting those massive lifts. Units are turning over. You're probably renting it for the same thing. Yep. Sometimes at a discount. Like, I have some units that had discount $50, $100 to get them filled up. And everyone I talk to, even like other big landlords that are opening brand new buildings, they're already starting. I've seen incentives online. On Facebook, I've seen people doing 1 month free in certain areas. So I think in actual practice, I don't think rents are going up. I think the way that they measure that data is what's skewing that completely.
Yeah, we've talked about that before, and I don't disagree with you, because there's also, to hear people talk about it, every rent is going up 90 to 200%, as if rent control doesn't exist.
Yeah.
There's also this misconception that almost everyone, I had someone comment this, virtually every lease in Halifax is fixed term. It's like, that is not
even 50%.
True. Yeah, it would be less than 50% are fixed term. And that would be up significantly from
the person
years.
That posted that is on a fixed term situation.
Exactly.
And they're pissed.
So it is all about how things are measured.
Should we switch, speaking of fixed terms, into property management before we digress any further?
Yes. I thought I had one little thing. What were we talking about there?
Home prices, 30-year AMs.
To end my thought. To end the thought. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing for buyers, because I also, I bought my first home and I had just missed out on the 0 down 40-year AM world.
Insanity.
So 0 down.
I didn't want to hear about
40-year amortization.
I don't know about it.
You would just show up,
sign documents
with your underwear and socks, and they'd give you in a house, right? All right,
your pulse is good.
And then it was 35-year AM, and then it was 30-year AM, and then it was 25-year AM. So I'm not going to be hypocritical to say I didn't ride that sweet gravy train for a little while. I don't think we're going back to 40. But, we tightened all those things because I got into the business fall of 2008, which is when they started to get rid of the 0 down and get rid of the 40-year AMs. And why was that? Oh, because of that little stuff that happened down in the States that wasn't super good. Mortgage crisis, and a lot of people drew parallels from this, because on September 18th of 2007, the Fed did a 50-point rate cut. Fast forward 17 years, the exact same day, they did a 50-point rate cut. Last year, or 17 years ago, it was the start of the absolute collapse of the U.S. housing market and the mortgage crisis. And people are drawing these interesting parallels for people who are really, doom and gloom on the market. But so I'm not saying it is negative for buyers. I would certainly try to find a way to take advantage of this if I were a buyer, starting out.
Yep.
Having said that, big picture, if something is good for sellers, good for developers, and good for the bank, it's hard for me to be convinced it's also good for the consumer.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's switch into property management. So to recap, last week, you mentioned that you had gone through 4 property managers in 4 years.
Yeah.
I actually had someone really interesting time. He asked me the other day, can you basically summarize how a property management contract is typically set up in terms of what they charge?
Okay. So the way a typical property management contract works is they charge a monthly fee based on the rent that they collect.
Like a percentage of gross?
A percentage of gross collected. I did get screwed at my very first manager where they charged me a percentage of gross, assuming all their units are rented, whether they were rented or not.
Ooh. Was that in the fine print and you didn't read it?
Apparently. That was the greasiest thing I'd ever seen. I'm like, dude, what the
hell? Could leave the unit vacant and still just be charging.
Yeah, I'm like, why would you ever rent the unit? But so they charge that fee.
That would be a great thing. Just don't rent the unit and still charge.
That fee ranges from probably as low as 3% up to as high as 10%. And that is determined based on how many units you have and what type of units you have. So if you have 1,000 brand new units all in one campus in Bedford, you're probably paying 3%.
Yeah, 3%. You've got to be a big institutional landlord with really, really good stock that the property manager wants your business for some reason.
Yeah. And then 10%, you're probably having like maybe 20 units or 10 units, and there's some duplexes, some triplexes, and a sixplex sitting around, and they're mildly renovated product, and you'll be around 8 to 10%. Included with that is you're getting, basically they just answer the tenant stuff. That does not mean that if there's like a broken faucet, you're still paying for that. You're paying for the plumber to go fix that faucet. The property manager will go and arrange with the tenant to get the plumber in there. They'll open the doors, whatever needs to be done, but you're still paying for that repair.
Do they mark that up, or do they charge for their time?
Depends on some companies mark it up. Some companies will mark it up 10 to 15%, and others will charge for their time, or others will just leave it be. And I'm seeing that now. Every property management company has their little fees. They might charge for statements. They might charge for door unlocks. They all have their different things. And it's very nuanced, and there's no set standards. So you really need to read through the contracts. So sometimes it might seem too good to be true. Probably is.
So here's an example. There is a sink that is broken in a unit. You as the owner, I'm going to just be like negative about property management the whole time. So you can put me in my spot when I'm saying all that.
I don't disagree, but yeah.
So a sink breaks. You don't get the call. The property manager gets the call. They go, they assess the sink. It is broken. They then go buy the new sink. They call the plumber. The plumber comes in, fixes the sink, and you never hear anything about it. However, depending on the property manager, there may be a fee for their time to go assess the sink. Could be.
Maybe.
Then, of course, they're going to buy the sink, and then they're going to hire the plumber, which you will get the bill for. And then, again, that might have taken them 3 hours of their time, and they may charge a, say, 10% fee for basically contract management for the plumber, and they may charge you something for their time. So
if the sink was $200, they might charge 10% on that. So they might charge $20. You pay $220 for the sink. The plumber might cost $200. They charge 15% on that. So you pay $230. Them charging for their time, less likely, but if they did, maybe they might charge $50 an hour for the time. But that's kind of covered in that percentage on average. That one's a much less likely scenario. But then, so the big things that you're going to pay for is the 30 and the 20 on top of the work actually getting done.
Yeah.
And some people have concerns because sometimes property management companies will just use the best plumber because it's easiest for them, right? Instead of chasing around some cheaper, affordable plumber, they just call whatever fancy brand there is out there, which will get it done, but they're going to be $600 to put in a sink when you probably could have got someone to do it for $75.
Yeah, and the flip side of it is basically cost you $50 extra, potentially a little bit more for a higher end service provider, but you didn't have to answer the call, you didn't have to get off the couch, you didn't have to do anything. Yep. That's pretty sweet, but that's also on top of maybe the 4 to 8% they were already charging you every single month anyway. Right?
Yeah, so if the two, exactly. The other thing they charge you is when there's turnover. So to rent out a unit, they want between half a month to a full month of rent to rent the unit. So if it's a $2,000 a month unit, they'll do the marketing, advertising, they'll find a person, they sign them up, they'll check them in the background, they'll write up the lease, everything, get them signed in. For doing that, they'll charge between $1,000 and $2,000 a month to have that person move in. So just consider basically either your damage deposit's gone or your first month's rent's gone. But that's the other major cost is renting out units. And that's where you see a lot of landlords, bigger landlords that have 300-400 unit buildings, they'll typically internally hire a leasing manager that can do it because they're like, well, it's 300 units. If I hire a company, average rent's $2,000, I'm going to spend at minimum $300,000 to get this building filled. I can just hire a guy to sit here on Kijiji all day and Facebook Marketplace and run people through for $60K.
There's also, that sounds like a lot of money, but on an individual unit basis, say a unit's up there for $1,800, right? So the property manager in theory could get $900. If they're only in a half month rental, it's $900. And again, that sounds like a lot. But when you realize, if you've ever posted a Facebook ad and you get inundated with all these responses and what it takes to respond to that, it's like, okay, that is a pain in the ass. Then you have to send them all applications. And even if you streamline that with a link in Google Forms, it's
still a pain in the ass.
Still a pain in the ass. Then you have to review those. Then you have to coordinate with the existing tenant showing times. Then you have to go there and show. And what happens if you go through 2 rounds of showings and it's not great? Well, now at this point, you have already invested probably about 5 hours of time and you still don't have a tenant to show for it. And so now you've got basically at $100 an hour, you've got another 4 hours to find, vet, and move in a tenant and sign a lease. And at some point as a property manager, you're like, damn, I'm just taking the next person that's any good.
Yeah.
And this is why bringing someone in-house can be nice, because you can be like, listen, you have to be very accountable to the person you bring in, because you're not just a fly-by-night arm's length from this company. You are in this company. So if you bring a bad tenant in, you are going to hear about it. Whereas property managers, it's more like, I got the place filled. And even if they're an asshole, the seller won't necessarily know for quite some time, because I'm getting the phone calls, which sucks. But in the meantime, I've made my $900, and we're rolling. Because I made $900 and the next month I'm making 180 off them.
Exactly.
Right.
And so those are the main expenses. The idea is they should be able to manage everything. You should be able to hand them over the building. You don't ever have to think about it. They take the keys. They manage any of the issues with the building, rekeying, move in, move out inspections for your tenants, keeping basically the building filled and running well. A lot of them end up putting in superintendents. The other thing that they'll charge for is, like, again, any of the fees that take place. Anything that's an expense over and above, like repair-wise, locked out keys, all those things, they'll charge a $50 key replacement fee, but they also then bill you for the replacement of the keys. So realistically, you're not seeing that $50. Now, you're going to say, like, I don't know if we want to go here. So that's what property management is, why people use it, and I'll say why I ended up switching to it. I tried to run a company in-house to do it. I personally did it for a bit. I absolutely hated it for a bunch of different reasons. Partially because I have my own other things. You guys always hear me talk about other things that I'm looking at. The next thing is, like, I'm not down to rip out in the evenings like Chandler is.
I just realized how bad my body posture is right now, because this is my defensive posture.
This is your defensive
I'm sitting back and I have my arms crossed. For people who aren't watching this, I feel under attack here.
You are, yeah. So I value my time. And then I was just not very effective at doing it. And then as I scaled, I was like, do I want to focus on property management, or do I want to focus on my investments themselves? And if I look at the amount of time I'm spending in a year on property management, if I just focus that on, for me originally it was making money. I was like, I can make more money by being out on the street selling homes than managing my properties. And so that's kind of how it originally started. I struggled with companies. So I was like, I'll go in-house, because then I have someone full-time, like I talked about last time. But I found I was having difficulty because of the way that I operate, where I'm traveling a lot. I'm not physically present in the office all the time. And I want to run a certain type of lifestyle that it's not conducive for someone working with me. And so that was proving to be difficult. So then I ended up going to a company where I feel like I have the ability to be completely free of it. And I understand I'm not going to make as much money because I'm giving them a percentage of my income, and they're paying for the rent turnovers and all that. But, like, this isn't my be all end all, right? So, like, for me, this is an investment portfolio. And I just want it to operate, and that's a cost that I'll build into owning it. So that, to me, I'm like, if I can get better investments, or I can make a better buy, it'll cover the cost of the property management. And it has to be done one way or another, right? And I don't think, like, at some point, even you have to hire someone. Like, there's just physically, you get to a limit where it just ain't worth it, and it's not feasible.
I was thinking about you, because I was showing apartments Sunday at 8:00 at night and Monday at 8:30 at night. I was showing apartments.
Yeah, like, what the hell are you doing, man?
But I have the best tenants in the city, I would say. If you took all my buildings, far and away, I've got the best tenants in the city.
Yeah, but you have the worst life in the city.
So, hey, listen, I also have a wife and 2 kids. Sometimes it's just nice to get out of the house.
I'd like to have Lana come in and explain to her side of property management, and see how she feels about you being out there Sunday at 8 p.m. Like, man, I don't know. That's where I'm like, if anything, I'm single. I should be out there doing that right now. But, like, I'm like, I got like, corny as hell. I got one life to live, and I'm not spending my Sunday at 8:00 doing. I want to work. Like, I'll be at home working, but I'm going to be working on other tasks and projects and things that I'm looking at. But again, I'm like, okay, here's an investment that I can do really well on, or here's a project I'm really excited to do. I don't want to fill my time with this, and I'm trying to remember, like, this is an investment for me. It's not my entire life. And so, and for you, you might look at it a little bit differently. You're more active in this, and you enjoy it more than I do, and you have different goals out of it than I do. So it makes sense to be a part of it for you.
Yeah, but I enjoy property management more than most people, I would think. As much as, like, there are some times where I'm just like, what the fuck am I doing? There's no question. But I do enjoy it more than most people. Like, for the most part, I like knowing my tenants. And I've actually been saddened over the last little bit where I haven't known them as well. And I like the human element of giving someone a nice place to live. Not to make myself sound like I'm such a great guy. Like, I said this some the other day, I would say 90% of my tenants think I'm, they probably think I'm a pretty great landlord. I would like to think, in grand scheme.
This guy's just juiced himself up.
Maybe 80% would think I'm a great landlord. And then there's probably a batch that think I'm like, he's okay. And then there's some that think I suck.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because sometimes you just come across a unit that's cursed. Like, you have a 12 unit building and there's one unit that the window leaks and then the toilet backs up. And like, there's always this one unit that for whatever reason, like, you just can't get in a good rhythm with. But I do like that element of it more than most. And I think because I'm more involved in it, I have a way better tenant base. And, I have kind of, I get less calls as a result. This is part of the reason I struggled to justify, say, just even when we split the difference and say 5-6% on a property management. Like, okay, my building over here brings in $20,000 a month, right? It's like I struggle with the idea of paying that when, like, I'll go in some cases with a building for 3 months and I'll get 2 emails, right? It's hard for me to kind of justify that. But make no mistake, the buying the building is sexy. The renovating the building is sexy. The building the building is sexy. The management is the worst. That's what kills people. And I think that's been part of the problem with the social media real estate investor, is because the first thing they say is, this is how I retired at 40.
Yeah.
And they say, it was super easy. I just, triaged 40 Airbnbs. And now I live the life of my dreams and I never work. It's like, no. It just doesn't happen.
The rubber meets the road with management.
Yeah.
Like you said, the easy part is buying it. It's fun and sexy. If you're doing rent-outs or building, it's fun and sexy. Once you get into dealing with the management of it, it is a whole nother beast. And that's why, again, for me, I think I'm more the social media, like, internet investor guy. Like, I don't love this. I don't think I ever did. And I don't think I ever made any, like, bones about that. Like, I didn't do this because I loved it. I got sucked in because I wanted to make a certain amount of cash money in a certain period of time. And there was a window to do so.
But I also don't think you, or if you were, you're not anymore, like, ignorant to the fact that the management is hard and the management needs to be worked at. A lot of people think, like, it's just passive, man. I'll be out on my boat while the rent checks roll in. It's like, you're gonna have to build a system, and it's not that easy to your experience of 4 in 4 years.
Totally. And I also want to provide good living spaces and this and that. Like, it's disheartening for me to go to some of the units because I've never been in some of them, and they've been run and rented by different managers. And I'm like, who the hell is this? And why the hell does it look like this in here? Like, this is insanity. And so, yeah, I think that's the other part that's kind of getting to me. And I think the culture around apartments, like from a renter's side, from a management side, even an owner's side, is so messed up right now, at least locally. But I think in Canada, it's definitely a turnoff in a lot of ways. Like, even to the point of, like, I know some of the best builders in the city, and they tell me stories like, yeah, I walk out and people spit in my face because they're like, you're the reason that rents are so high, and you're the this, and you're just a rich, greedy landlord. And on this, like, man, like, these guys build beautiful apartments for people to live in. They take so much pride in their buildings. They take pride in their management, like, and they're getting spit on. So it's a thankless industry in a lot of ways, even if you're really good at it, which I found really tough. And so this is what's turning me off more and more as the years have gone on, right? Like, I was so excited to get in and do it. And so I'm trying to change that. But again, I just don't see management being something that is super valuable to me unless I get to a point where I have a huge portfolio and ultimately it makes more sense to go back in-house. I know the manager that I'm working with, like, he has multiple landlords that are pretty large that are shutting down internally their management companies, and they're rolling their entire portfolios into his under his wing, because it's such a hostile environment out there, man. Like, it's just not enjoyable. Most people looking for the unit aren't like, I'm looking for a home. It's like, I just need a place to live for 2 years. Give me this shitbox. Like, I don't care. Right. And so that's the other thing I don't like is our culture is still messed where people don't feel ashamed to rent a lot of the time, or don't like the fact that they're renting. And so they're doing it begrudgingly. Right. So, like, that's the other thing that I remember I went to the CIBC presentation. He's like, and we've talked about a few times on here, is they need to, like, the Canadian culture needs a change where, like, renting's not a sign of failure. Right. And we've talked about that, where, like, the cost of owning a home is extremely high. So if you rent a reasonable apartment and you invest your money, you're not necessarily in any worse shape. You really aren't. So I don't know. That's something I've been thinking a lot about. And, like, I'd love to try and have an impact on that. Right. Because it's been a tough couple of years. And I think that'll change now as rents start to cool off and people feel more stable and they're not getting turned over in their units. And people are starting to accept maybe also the position that they're in, because I think there's been this generational situation and all these new people to Canada that maybe aren't I think everyone's not necessarily has accepted that they're like, okay, maybe I'll be renting for 5 or 10 years. Right. And so then that will go down like, okay, I'm happy to be here. I like my unit. I can work with my landlord. I'm going to keep it in decent shape. Because that was the other thing I was finding is a lot of units I was walking out of were just in terrible shape.
And that's frustrating too, because when you start taking on all these expenses and then you realize that, your units actually might get worse over time, not better, the numbers get worse accordingly.
100%. Yeah. A couple things I want to make as like a suggestion from my experience is, first one, we've already alluded to it, is making sure you read the heck out of the contract. The property management contracts are fairly long, simply because if they're not, then the company hasn't been around for any time. But any company that's been around has had all these different experiences, so they make them fairly long. Make sure you read through the whole thing, because to what we said, like there might be little expenses where they mark things up, or they charge for extra things, or they might charge additional rent for rent that's not even being collected. Like there's so many different ways that they can do it. So just read through it fully, interview multiple managers and really get a feeling for it. When you interview the managers, also, if you can, do everything in your power to reach out to people to see if they know anything about them. Right? It's a lot easier now with social media. You can message people and ask, but like that was my biggest mistake is I did all my interviews with the first couple guys. I knew nobody in the industry, so I had to make a gut feeling decision, which I ended up making a bad decision.
Because they should be able to provide references. I mean, if this
exactly
is what you do and you have satisfied clients, come on.
Give us some references. Yeah. Make sure you're in a position where you make it apparent if you're intended to grow your portfolio, like you're going to renegotiate your rate as there's growth, right? Like, yeah, you're coming out with them with 10 units, but you're going to be buying another 40 in the next 2 years. Like you need to talk to them about that. Like, look, I'm not going to keep paying 8% once I have 40 units or 50 units, whatever it is. To that point, make sure you switch to property management before it's an issue. This was something that I would say I did an okay job of, but not great. And I said that like I started having units going empty. I started having problems and the problems started to pile up. And then I tried to make the switch, and that also forced my hand where I had to make a decision very quickly. It's also more difficult to get a good manager because good managers will be like, well, let me look through your units. I'm like, well, if half the units are empty and they're in rough shape, like, nah, we're not going to take you on. Or we're going to quote you at such a high rate that you're going to lose a ton of money. So if things are running good right now, but you don't like it and you want to scale, now's a great time to look at doing this, because waiting, it's not going to get any better. Once you have a manager, consult with them with what you're doing. Again, most of them are going to be experienced, have been in the game for a while. Before you buy a building, consult with them. Be like, hey, should I buy this building? What's your take? Maybe bring them to one of the showings, bring them to the inspection, have them engaged and involved in your process. They'll be happy because they'll know that you actually respect them and value what they do. Additionally, they might be like, we're not willing to manage some of these buildings. I have a client who I know.
Yeah, like I'm not going to that location. I'm not doing,
100%. Like I have a client who we were looking at a stack of buildings and he's like, my manager just said no. Like he just wouldn't manage them. And so like I have to take them on myself. Do I want to take them on myself? And so then that swayed his decision. So make sure you engage them early on. The other thing is something that I've learned is understand that they're a management company. You're not their only client. They might not be as insanely quick as you on certain things. Like you're like, my unit's usually rented like in a week. And it's like, yeah, well, we do you and 40 other people. Right? Like you're part of the queue, so it's not going to be as efficient necessarily. Like there might be units that go empty for a month, and that's just part of it because they're running it like a big portfolio, right? Like when you look at like a Killam, they run a certain amount of vacancy, and even though they could fill all their units, technically, the amount of volume that they have to get through, they could just plain and simple can't.
Yeah.
And so they're going to run a percentage of vacancy. Well, now you're a part of one of those. So now you're going to run a percentage vacancy. Even if the marketplace is 0, you're going to be running at the actual new stat of 2 to 4%. You're going to be running at that because the firm just physically cannot get people moved in to all these units that quickly. So just some consideration. So there is a fair bit of cost in having property management, but it depends on what your goals and your objectives are. And so for me, again, like I want to be an investor. I want to look at different things. I don't appreciate like being out on the road doing those things. So I'm willing to take that haircut. And now I'm just like, I just got to make up the money somewhere else.
The other thing, and this is a quick way to make that money back like that, is that a property manager could be a deal flow source. Or like they have other clients who have rentals. They have some older clients who might be getting out of the game.
Yep.
And the insight they have and the lead potential they have there on units is huge. And so you get one good buy through your property manager every 2 years, and that more than pays for them. So that's something
100%.
to consider as well.
100%. If you add up all the hours that they're going to save or all the hours you spend on property management, and you went on Property Online and listed out all the properties and the phone numbers, made all the phone calls and started banging on doors during those hours, do you not think you could find one deal per year that would outweigh the value of what a property manager would cost?
Totally. Yeah. I don't doubt that for sure.
So it's a mindset. It's like, what do you want to be doing? But I appreciate what you do. Like, there's a portion of that, like, you enjoy doing it. You enjoy being involved with your tenants. You enjoy going out and doing those things. And like, there is, like, I know for a lot of people, it's nice to be physically involved in some of it. Same with construction. Like, I don't particularly want to be on site for the construction, but I know a lot of my buddies do. Like, they enjoy it. And it can be fun once in a while for, like, I get it.
My buddy
some people enjoy it more than others.
My buddy was framing out storage lockers in our garage in the unit. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could just do this all day today.
Yeah.
Like, I love framing. I don't know if you've ever done much framing. It is so fucking satisfying.
Yeah.
Just like building walls, man.
Yeah.
Like, and just looking at that. And like, I'm also a little bit OCD. So just like a whole wall of like perfect framing. I didn't want to go to work. I was so bad. Like, I was just like looking over at like the drills and I'm just like, I kind of want to do this too. But also being like, I would just slow them down. I can't do this. Right. Like, but yeah, like I miss the days of actually being in there doing a little bit of that. But that's something that over time I stepped away from. I was like, because my first one with that actually, where I didn't outsource and I didn't hire, a project manager or a general contractor, which is the same mindset.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll just project manage myself or whatever.
Yep.
The difference was it took me 3 extra months to finish the unit. Mm-hmm. Conservatively, 3 extra months to finish the unit.
Yep.
And the unit was, say, $1,500. So like, and these were relatively small renovations. It was probably like the overall project expense was probably $35,000.
Yep.
So it took me 3 extra months to do it, which meant $4,500 in opportunity cost, lost rent. Mm-hmm. But I probably saved like $3,500, and that was when I was like, okay, I just need to outsource this. And I was there, what was my time worth? Because I was there putting down all the baseboard myself, hanging the doors myself, doing the trim, like, all of that, and thinking I was saving money. And at some point I was like, oh, I'm not actually saving money. And the novelty wore off because it was really fun for a while. And then you're like doing baseboards in like your 6th unit, and you're like, fuck this.
Trim and flooring is the one that I remind everybody of that on. Because everyone's like, I can do the trim and the flooring. I'm like, you can, but you're going to spend the next 8 weekends laying this flooring. You could also hire somebody to lay the flooring.
Carl can do this in one afternoon.
Literally, Carl and his 6 dudes will be in and out of here. It'll be floored and trimmed in an afternoon, and you're going to save 2 months of rent, and you're going to pay Carl $1,000. Let's say you're going to need net positive $2,000.
Yeah.
So but again, it depends. Some people really enjoy it. Like to your point, I have one of my best friends. He does he's very skilled. He does all of his work on his properties himself. And I look at him like, you genuinely love this. Like, it's peaceful for him. He works at it. He knows how he likes it to look, and he's efficient at it. And so every weekend, like, he's out there working, and like, he jokes. And I think he was like the same thing. Like, oh, I'm out there at Sunday at 8, but genuinely, I think he likes it. Like, I think that's where he'd rather be than be at home on the couch or
100%
sitting at home working on spreadsheets, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah. I would be Netflixing, and there's not been a whole lot of good shows coming to Netflix lately, as you guys know. So sometimes I'd rather be out showing you this. But there is also an economy of scale here, because we talked about like you have just a couple of units, you may be paying 10%, and it is hard to make the numbers work with a 10%, right off the bottom line right away. Because again, that's on your gross, man. That's not your net. That's 10% just gone, right? So you find me a bunch of people who are making 10% clear profit on their buildings that they can just toss out. That's item number one. So you do have to hit an economy of scale. And some of that's going to depend on like what you want your portfolio to be. If you want your portfolio to be, 40 to 400 units, then maybe this is something you have to build in. If not, if it's under that, it may just flat out not make sense.
Totally. Right? The other thing, and I guess I didn't touch on, I'm going to go into this now. So if you're still listening, hiring in-house. Okay, because I have experience in having hired in-house. This guy still hasn't learned to turn his damn music off his phone. Anyways. So I tried hiring in-house. When I first did it, I had maybe 20 units. But the way I justified it is they were coming on as a project manager and a property manager.
Right.
They're helping me on both ends of it. So I was like, they can help me with the construction because I'd be missing stuff. I wouldn't be able to get the materials, blah, 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 blah. And at that point in time, I had 3 or 4 buildings under reno. So immediately they had a full workload because they're running all day, helping getting the buildings ready. The other thing was by being involved in the process of getting the buildings ready, they knew everything really well, more intimately involved, and they were more interested in actually getting good tenants. So that's how I justified hiring a manager right off the hop at that small unit count. But you got to think, you're going to pay someone If they're going to be decent, you want someone with experience. You don't want to have to train somebody new, especially if you're newer to the game. Like, it doesn't make sense. Once you're a huge landlord, sure, then you have already other managers that can train the person up and they can grow into their position. But you're going to need someone experienced because you don't know what you don't know already, and you're trying to get this off your plate, not make it another additional task. You're going to be paying them probably 70 G's, 60 to 70 grand for anyone half decent, like worth their weight.
House, yeah, for sure.
So just keep that in mind and do the math on how much rent that would have to be to make sense, right? Like, you'd have to be bringing in probably $120,000 gross at 5% to make that 60 G's. The other consideration is in that expense is that person still has to pay for repairs and stuff. Like, the property manager now is not going to fix the faucet when it's broken. They still have to hire a plumber, right? So another difficulty I had, my first manager was really good with that, but my second one was not. He would respond to every tenant's inquiry. Like, a tenant would be like, hey, my shower head's dripping a little bit. He just hired a plumber instantly.
Right.
And so, like, he was spending his 60 grand in his salary plus another $60,000 in little electrician bills, this, that, and another thing. Like, oh, light switch wasn't working. Instantly just have an electrician there. I'm like, yeah, great. Tenant's pumped because there's an electrician there in 30 minutes, but I'm paying for this electrician to be there, which is going to be at least $200 for a service call.
Yeah.
So when you're hiring in-house, you got to make sure that they're experienced. They need to understand the mindset. You can give them different rules. And actually, you can do this with the firm that you hire as well. As you can say, under $400, you guys can spend it. Over that, you have to call me for approval.
Yeah.
And so that was my experience there. I liked having in-house because they were a value to me on all fronts. But it takes a very unique type of person as well, because a lot of times if they're coming from another company, they did one thing. They were a leasing manager. They were a property manager. They weren't doing the whole shebang where they're running ads, they're showing units, they're writing leases, they're also managing the properties. Like, that's
doing the books.
Doing the books. Like, that's a big, very broad scope of work to be handling. And so it's quite difficult. And so ultimately, like, I could never even find someone that was open to be doing the books. So I had to have an accounting firm on retainer that I paid as well. And so now my new property manager is also going to be doing the books. So
which will save you some money there.
Which will save me some money there, because I'm now able to cancel that monthly cost that I have for my accountant and eliminate the cost from having an in-house manager. But so if you're thinking about hiring someone, like, it sounds all exciting and this and that, but consider, like, it's going to be expensive. And so you really need to weigh that cost. And you're probably sitting like, frig, I'm in this weird, awkward size where I can't really afford to hire someone. I can't really afford to do a property management company. And I feel like I'm stuck in the loop. Couple options, right? Either maybe you sell some stuff in your portfolio and try and buy something bigger, or maybe you look at splitting something with someone. So maybe you have 40 units and your best friend has 40 units and your other friend has 40 units. Maybe the three of you guys can come together to hire one person or two people, right? And that was the next thing. This would have been the next step for me, and which I think is really important. And it might still be if I buy maybe another 100 unit stack, is a maintenance person. Because it gets to the point where there's so much small little maintenance. I'm already seeing it now with this company. Like, I'm getting 20 invoices a week. It's the leaky faucets, the broken doorknobs, the cracked, the ripped screens. Like, there's just so much little shit.
That's where I'm going to be screwed, man, because that's what my dad does. Like, my dad saves me thousands of dollars on appliance repair.
How much you paying him
every year? $0.
I need to talk to your dad. So I'm like, look, you can get him for at least $2,000 a month. But
he's not a listener.
But that would be the next step. And so there's kind of that progression of, like, you can hire a manager and you got to find a dual person. Then you want to hire on a maintenance, a small time maintenance guy. And I think once you have those two people going, you can have around 300 units and it runs pretty nicely if they get along and they get their systems in place and you start to have good tenants and it's not turning over a crazy amount. That's like a sweet spot to be at. But again, getting 300 units is no joke. Nowadays, that could be anywhere from a $50 to $100 million portfolio. Like, that's, you got to be pretty, huge. That's huge, right? So you got to be pretty serious to get there. But I think the correct answer, there isn't one. I think it's, you got to look at what your objectives are, what you're trying to do, where you want to go with it. Having gone through this whole process, if you can find someone that you can hire outside of your group that's really good, that's awesome. I think, as I'm saying all this, the best would be someone who's like doing like 2 or 3 small portfolios that actually takes pride in what they're doing. Right? That would be awesome, where it's like, okay, you share a couple people and that works well. We should have done that. But it is tough finding
I always feel like I just need to get my stuff just a little bit better, and then I'll do it.
You'll never let go.
Okay, let's wrap it up there. I wanted to mention something, and I forgot to mention it off the hop. Daniel O'Coin, we were talking about foreclosures.
Yep.
He messaged with a crazy story. So we were talking about how to buy foreclosures. You can check that episode a couple, weeks ago. Yep. And Daniel reached out and he was saying he had actually managed to intervene during the bank process. right? And was working on a deal with the bank. And when he'd go by the properties, the neighbor would come out, and the neighbor would be like, "Oh yeah, we're getting this house. You know, you can't buy this house. We want this house. You know, don't even try. Like, we're getting this house."
Yeah.
And he's kind of like, "Says you, I'm going to try to get this house."
Yeah.
So he had an agreement. The day before closing, that house burns down.
No way.
Yeah. So, I mean, it would be normal to assume that probably the neighbor torched that sucker.
Yeah, who lit the house on fire?
If I can't have it, no one can have it.
That's a little psycho.
That's a crazy story. So, all right. Thanks for listening. Can you guys do us a solid? If you're listening, share it to your story. Let people know that you're listening.
We're back.
Yeah, let people know that we're back. So if you've listened to this point, please throw it up on your social media. We appreciate the support.
We do. And if you're a property manager and you have some interesting stories or you want to come on and pipe yourself up, let us know.
Good call.
Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.
Thanks so much for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. Don't forget to subscribe. But also check us out on Instagram and TikTok. You can find all the links below. Thanks again for checking us out.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.